Hey, what's up everybody? It's Eric from the Pinball Foundry. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about the newest design that I've been working on for Stern Pinball's King Kong Myth of Terror Island. Ooh. I've been able to play this game. I've actually purchased the Pro. And one of the things that I noticed in playing some of them was that there's some flat plastics, and they typically do this with the lower model pinball machines. It's not unusual that they would not do sculpted mods within the pinball and just use these flat plastic acrylic pieces. And one of the pieces that I noticed that I would have liked to have modded, and you can see it in the premium and the LE version, it's a sculpted plastic, was the Kong Gong. So I looked at it, I took some pictures while I was at Southern Fried Gaming Expo through the glass. The one thing that I love about pinball and the one thing that I love about modifications and custom parts is you can create your own world under glass. And it's really important as collectors and as pinball enthusiasts that we sort of make our pinball machine for ourselves. And if you've got the ability to, great, throw some different elements in there and it makes yours different than everybody else's. To give you a little insight on how it's all designed, I wanted to walk you through the steps. So the first thing was I took a couple of reference photos. I knew kind of what I wanted it to look like. I wasn't able to actually get under the glass and measure it while I was at the expo. So I just sort of guessed on what the dimensions would be. One of my pinball machines back here, Metallica, has a very similar structure on the play field. And so I used that as sort of a mock-up of about how big I thought it would be. Then I got into my design software and I started to sketch everything out. Just like you would sketch it out on a piece of paper, I was sketching it out in 3 dimensions. You start with some line work. You create the shapes that you want. You create the angles. You lock everything in specific height and width and different dimensions, basically. And then you take that sketch and you start to build your model off of it. So once I've got the design in my software, I've got all of the line work basically, I'm able to then extrude some of these parts out and make them in 3-dimensional form, add in color and texture and whatnot. So this was the very first prototype that I designed that came off of that initial model. And when I took this part up to Backyard Arcade in Porter's Neck and visited my friend Dale up there, I was really surprised. It fit, right? Just like the cup holder, it fit. I was blown away how accurate I got off of that initial sketch. Now there were some things that I needed to refine, but from that initial design, everything looked to be on a good starting path. Unfortunately, if you've ever worked in design software, and especially once you get further into the timeline of the design that you're working on. So early in the timeline, you'll start with those line sketches. And then as you move into your timeline, you're extruding different areas and making the 3-dimensional look and feel. Well, once you get to a certain point, if you decide you want to go back in time and edit that initial sketch, maybe a line didn't match up exactly where you wanted it. Maybe you needed something a little thicker or a little thinner in certain areas. You go back and you redesign the sketch. That then affects further back into the timeline. So it's like time traveling, right? I go back in the past and I make a change, it's gonna affect the future. And unfortunately, that happened to me with my initial design. So I took my initial design, now I had some more ideas. I had some things like what I call the upper teeth area needed a little more refinement. I was getting a little too ambitious in how I wanted to pull texture out of the 3D. When I went back to the sketches and I was making modifications, it was kind of messing up all of the extrusions and the forms that I was creating from that sketch. At some point, the program crashed completely. I had done something terribly wrong and I lost my initial design. But that's okay, because again, you make mistakes and you learn from your mistakes. I had now an idea of exactly how I wanted it to look. I knew that my dimensions were pretty spot on. There were a couple things obviously that needed to be changed and tweaked, but I was able to predict some of the issues that I had further in that initial timeline and build that into the second sketch of my second prototype. So first prototype, out the window, but this was a really good indication of what I wanted it to look like. So that was sketch number one. Now with sketch number two, I got really aggressive with really trying to pull fine detail out of the image. Now that I've got the sketch where I needed it and I wasn't having to go back necessarily and do major modifications to the sketch because I knew how it was gonna look as a finished printed product, I was able to make some more fine line and more detail with the bricks and some of the other components. So now with prototype number two. Prototype number two, can you see that I now had issues with prototype number two as well? And this was just a byproduct of me being too creative. I wanted to cram 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. I realized quickly this is a 3 by 4 inch or so part that I couldn't really do all of the fine detail that I wanted to with a filament printer. So I needed to simplify the design. If you notice, the bricks on the top portion did not turn out very well. And that was simply because I was trying to be a little too detailed, a little too much fine line, and the print just looks horrible. I was able to refine, if you notice, from prototype number one to prototype number two, I now brought the fangs in. I now simplified some of the teeth, or the upper teeth that I would call it. I started to put in some translucent material for the eyes so that the LEDs would shine through the back. I simplified a couple of the little accent pieces that I wanted to sort of, again, simplify. I added a little gorilla face in the top. And if you notice, I changed the design on the gong. So now it actually looks a little more like a King Kong skull and a little less like Skeletor. So that's prototype number two. Lessons learned again. Now with prototype number two out of the way, I was able to get my sketch a lot more polished so I could move further into the timeline of my design and focus on cleaning up some of the more finer details that I just got a little too aggressive with. So then came version number three, prototype number three. Now prototype number three, I took all the lessons that I had learned in the first couple prototypes, and with this one, if you notice, now I have built in the acrylic eyes, whereas before I was trying to make them interchangeable. I thought it would be kind of neat if you could change them out, yellow, blue, red, change them out as you wanted them. With this one, I decided, let me go ahead and just incorporate it into the final print and make it more permanent. If you notice across the top, I simplified the bricks. I took out all of the fine lines that was causing issues in the previous print are now resolved in the newest print. And I added a little bit more intricate vine work. So with this one, I was really happy. So I thought I was at a really good spot with prototype number three. The problem is this is a very, very heavy print. This print, one piece, took about 12 hours to print. It's not very thick, but when you think about your printing from the bed up, each layer that needs to be printed has to go through multiple colors. When I put the vine work on the side, every single layer needs to change colors now 4 times. So you're picking up green, your gray, your gold, your black. So the printer is constantly printing a very fine layer, but it has to switch colors 4 times for each of those layers. And it caused this one piece to be, like I said, 12 hours long. I needed to get that better. I really wanted it to be 9 to 10 hours maximum. I knew it was going to be a long print because it is fairly detailed. By putting some of the color on the side of the piece, it was now creating a lot of waste and a lot more time to print. As far as refinement from prototype 2 to prototype 3, you can see I've refined that top piece. I've also refined the center piece, but not much was really done to the overall structure and design of it. That was pretty much locked in. It was just how I was dealing with the accents, how I was drawing the texture out of the bricks. So this is prototype 3. And with prototype 3, I felt really good and ready for another test print. So I printed a prototype 4. Prototype 4 is where I also learned some lessons, which again, this happens. So this one I took over to Backyard Arcade. I did a test fit with, this time, with some feet. And I was able to drill the holes so that it can sit and actually screw into the playfield plastic. I simplified the design again, but what I did do, if you noticed, I created a failure point, and I'm glad I found it in the design, and that's what iteration of prototyping is all about. Instead of using texture for the bricks, I minimized the amount of grout in between each of the bricks. And when I did that, there wasn't enough structure. The legs were a little wobbly. And as I was drilling the holes, these got really wonky and eventually broke off completely. So again, you learn your lesson. When I went back to the drawing board on this one, I was able to design in texture so that the bricks still stood out, but I now have more structure in the support. So that's now been resolved in what I'm calling the final prototype, which would be prototype 5. Prototype 5 will be a final test print. And if everything looks good, I have just a couple little minor tweaks to do, but it'll be ready for production. And I'm excited to announce that I should be able to start production on the actual mod starting early next week. So prototype 4, we learned some lessons. The only real thing that I would probably change from prototype 4 to prototype 5 and actually into the production is I want to offset this lens. If you notice, it sort of blends in a little bit with the top. And so I wanted to create a little more depth and texture there. So I'm gonna be recessing the lenses so it's a little more inside of the design. And you won't see as much of the fine lines from that they're normal with 3D printing, but it'll offset it. And this, what I would call the brow of the Kong Gong will be a little more pronounced. So lessons learned, but a great test fit. What was really exciting was it fit again. So now prototype 5. Again, this is pre-production prototype. I think we're super close. This is what the final prototype looks like. So we've accented the brow a little bit more. I now have some nice vine work. And what I've decided to do with the vine work is keep it on the top side of the print. So there's no vine work on any of the sides. And that's merely for cost and speed of print. If you remember on previous prototypes, I've got some of the vine work on the side. I've decided to eliminate the vine work on the side and just put it on the top, but much more pronounced. So now when you're printing from the bed, you're only changing colors 3 times through the gong, 2 times once you get past the gong into the rest of the brick. And then on the top surfaces is where you're finally changing to that green. So it'll minimize the amount of changing. It'll minimize the amount of filament waste in that print process. The other thing that I've done here is I've added mounting holes. So instead of having to drill those, I've now measured and know exactly where those are. I've given it a little wiggle room for any modifications. I may tighten that up when it goes to production and I do one more test fit. The last thing that I'll do is I'm going to trim the feet because I know that how the plastic is sort of angled, and these are square so they stick out. So I'm going to angle those to meet the playfield plastic. And then again, I'm going to recess the lens of the eyes. But that's gonna be it. I'm gonna do one more test fit of prototype 5 and then we're in production. I estimate these to be about $60 to $65. They'll be available on my Shopify store, shop.pinballfoundry.com. And the first 10 orders, if you get on my pre-order list, the first 10 people on that list will receive a special promo code to give you a discount and expedited shipping. A little thank you for being the first to give these a try. I'm hoping that by tomorrow or this weekend, I'll be able to get by and do one more test fit and then one more final version that will be ready for production and installation both at Backyard Arcade, and I'll also take it over to where my King Kong Pro is located and mount and install one there. We'll do a couple days of testing, but it's solid. Hear that? It's a solid chunk of heavy plastic. I did get some holes in the back to mount the LED lights. So it will use the exact hardware. You'll simply unscrew a couple bolts, take the playfield plastic off, unscrew a couple screws that hold the existing acrylic on, put everything back on, and then use the existing mounts to mount this in its place, mounting the LEDs on the back. But that's it. That's how I designed the Kong Gong, and I'm excited to get people to try it. And I can't wait to see them in King Kong Pro pinball machines across the country very soon. I think they're gonna look great with some of the other King Kong mods that I'm working on, including the speaker panels. I'm really excited to see how it all comes together. And I look forward to doing more things like this. But that was just to give you a quick idea of my design process. I'll include some images after this video of the process of the test fits, of the designs. And yeah, again, I can't wait to get these in everybody's hands. Thanks again for watching. This is Eric at the Pinball Foundry, shop.pinballfoundry.com and pinballfoundry.com. If you're looking for any 3D printed pinball parts and accessories, be sure to check it out. Thanks again. I'll catch you on the flip side.